My name is Karen Porter, and I am the health and happiness coach for women over 50. I love helping women to feel great and live their best life, and that's why I'm so passionate about sharing my story. My story is really one of anxiety and depression, suicidal bouts of depression. Happiness is something that, I truly felt as a child, even as an adolescent and young adult. I didn't have any bouts of, anxiety or depression that I remember. I was brought up in a very positive atmosphere. There were times, as all of us have, where there's small traumas, right, that happen. We adjust ourselves accordingly. I know that I built up sort of a wall or a mask, shall we say, that is how we are in the world. So yeah, as a young person, I generally was quite happy, and that's why when I experienced depression, it was really very shocking. It wasn't like me. It was hard for me to handle, hard for my husband to handle. My first episode or bout of anxiety and depression was I was in my 20s. I just remember, and when it happened subsequently, I always know that it starts with increased anxiety. So it kind of comes, for me, comes out of nowhere. And I start getting more anxious about things that wouldn't normally bother me. I think because I've always had a bit of a weak stomach, I was diagnosed years later as an adult with IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. So obviously, when I did worry about something, it did present itself in my gut. Years later, I found out about the gut-brain connection. And so people who have digestive issues often have mental disorders or some mental illness. For me, it was just increased anxiety, and then it was insomnia. So it would be like I couldn't fall asleep for hours and hours. And when I did finally fall asleep, I was up at 4 a.m. and just beside myself. And it would always be that when I woke up, it's so early, I was still either that anxious feeling would start right away, or maybe it never left. I think it was with me constantly. But I remember waking up and feeling that way. So it was just one dreadful day after another. And then eventually it starts to affect your brain. It has to. I was making mistakes at work. I lost all my confidence. I was normally quite a confident person. This would happen and I would just lose all my confidence. And then one thing would feed into another, and then it was like, I am terrible at this. I can't do my job. I'm a terrible wife. And so, yeah, my first episode was before I had children. And then I thought, okay, when I have kids, I'm going to be more well-rounded because I'm going to be thinking of them. It won't just be me and work. The only one I ever shared anything with outside of my husband was my family doctor. I remember going to him and saying something's going on. I'm not sleeping well. And so he gave me anxiety medication, which really is a Band-Aid and really just makes things worse. I think I just knew in my mind it wasn't something that was supposed to go out. Eventually, I told my mom and my sister, and then years later, a very close sister-in-law. It was something really that we kept in the household. And really, when I think about it and I look back now, it was a huge burden for my husband each time it happened. Thank God he was so resilient and he's a rock and was able to handle those times with me. And I'd say, why are you still with me? Why are you here? He would look at me and say, because I love you and because there's so much more of good Karen than the time you are like this. For me, when I was in the worst of the depressive states, I would retreat into myself. I kept trying to push myself to go to work until eventually I couldn't. I believe each time it happened, I ended up having to take time off work because I could not handle it anymore. And it's not even a sadness. I wouldn't even describe it as a sadness because I'm quite an emotional person. I was brought up that way. My mom was affectionate and emotional. When I'm sad or when I'm moved emotionally, I can watch a movie or even a commercial and get tears in my eyes. What I felt in depression for me was not even sadness. It kind of went back to that self-esteem thing and me feeling so low when I retreated, when I isolated from things that were going on and events, because it was like I wouldn't want people to see me like that. And my husband would have to make up excuses why I wasn't there. But I know the times that I pushed myself, I distinctly remember going to a function and almost not even speaking at all. I just, there was conversation around me and I just thought, I have nothing. I have nothing to contribute to anything. I've been doing nothing, so I can't tell you about any of my activities or work or anything. So it just feeds upon itself, and it made me feel worse. The first time I had the depressive episode in my 20s, I just remember going to the crisis center at a hospital and just sitting there. That time, I think I was admitted just from the conversation. I just remember thinking, why am I sitting in this place? I didn't want to be there, but I knew that I couldn't be at home. It happened, I believe, twice in my 30s, and then once in my 40s, and then again in my 50s. The other horrible episodes that I did have, I knew when it was happening early on. I would tell my husband I would go to the doctor, try an antidepressant, but you can't get in Canada anyway, to see a psychiatrist quickly. I remember sitting there one time talking to a gentleman who could not make a connection with, and I said something totally ridiculous. When I look back at it now, it was like, my closets are a mess and the kitchen drawers are all a mess, and I can't, to you and I, to me now and to most people, that it sounds ridiculous, because that is not something to be depressed about. I remember one time my sister-in-law coming over, and her and I sitting down on the floor and her trying to help me go through things. And then we would do it and she'd say, well, don't you feel better? You got this all organized? And I would be like, no. For many people, there is a triggering incident that causes the depression. 7 years ago, my mom passed away, and I had just been through a depressive episode. My family was so worried about me. I went through grief. I had profound sadness that wasn't the same thing at all. Because for me, the depression is how I feel about myself. It's not a sadness. It's just something that comes over me. So for my depressive episodes, there wasn't really something that precipitated. The only thing that I can think about that I've worked on is in my upbringing, which was very happy. There were, a lot of rules and expectations, and many people would say that that's not out of the norm. They were really drilled into me, and I think I was just that kid who took everything to heart, took everything personally. When it happened dealing with IBS, I had met with a nutritionist. She put me on an elimination diet. I did a bunch of things, and IBS felt so much better. And I thought, oh, this is it. I have found the answer, right? I'm doing all the things now. I'm eating right. I'm exercising. Then I started my health and wellness coaching. And then when it started again, it was even worse. So the anxiety built up, and then the insomnia, and then everything happening, and then, the depression spiraling down. I beat myself up, I think, even more, because here I am, a health coach, helping women to feel good physically and mentally. And here I am. When it happened in my 20s, like I said, I just went into the crisis center in the hospital. But when it happened subsequent times, I had been on medication from the doctor, and I did want to get out of my pain. And I took medication wanting to get out of my pain, and I was hospitalized those times. I just looked around and I thought, wow, I'm not like these people. Even my husband, I remember one time, the last time, begging him, please help me get out of here. He said something like, but you're safe in there. So I'm sure it was peace of mind, even for my husband, to know that I was being monitored. I was offered outpatient care, had classes that I went to that, that really were beneficial. It takes a long time. And I knew that I had to push myself. I know that you can't stay home and flake around on the couch and watch TV and hope that something's going to change, right? That it doesn't work like that. I tried to get back to my volunteering that I had done before. I was part of a practitioner group. Something that I'm doing right now called Brain Tap is something I really feel helped me. And I pass that on to all my clients now. Quality of life when I was in the depression was really bad. Like I said before, isolated myself more and more, was home all the time, didn't want to and couldn't do much of anything. For me, I had the IBS issues, and when I had that, it was like I've got a couple pictures where I'm 100 pounds, not wanting to go out because of the depression, but also not wanting to go out because I would always have to know where the bathroom was. Just wanting to get out of my brain. That's what it felt like. It's like even not doing my job anymore, whether it was when I quit my job or, when I just got a leave of absence, instead of looking at it as an opportunity, like, oh, I'm 45 and I'm changing my career now. Isn't this great? Look I'm showing my kids how you can do that. No, I couldn't see it that way. To me, it was like, I am such a failure. What am I teaching my kids? I'm showing them that I can't do this. There is still such a stigma with mental health. We feel like, and maybe not everybody, but we feel like we are supposed to hold everything together, that especially as women, we're supposed to look after everybody else. We keep it inside. Part of my upbringing too was holding it all together and presenting yourself well. So I had this career-minded, workaholic, entrepreneur father and this perfectionist, always put together mother. And I always said that when I'm good, I'm the best version of both of them. I remember one therapist saying to me, well, can you go to work without doing your hair or your makeup? And I was like, what? What? Why would I do that? And she said, you're wearing a mask. And I said, what? Now I'm more accepting of myself in that way, right? Without makeup on or without hair done. I do it now for myself, like for my pleasure and how I feel. Now I'm on the other side of it, and it really is something that I am aware of every day, because I think each time it happened, I would start to feel better, but I would never look back, right? It was like, oh, that horrible time in my life. I don't want to look back at that. I remember once saying to my son, I want you to know I'm doing better now. This was when he was, I'm going to say maybe 12 years old. And he said, I know, Mom, I know. I can tell. I wake up in the morning and the first thing I say to myself is, good morning, Karen. I love you. It's going to be a great day. There was something in me that said, you've got to figure this out. You've got to figure this out. So I would sit there trying to read and trying to do the things. And my husband would say, Karen, you can just relax. And I said, well, no, I can't. I have to get better. I have to figure this out. I could not see getting out of it. And, I would get on the scale and see that I was going down. How was it so bad that I was so hopeless that I was writing a note to my family that I was so sorry and I loved them so much, but wanting for it to be done? I believe that those things happened for a reason, to put me where I am now, to be able to help other women.